Alright, time to take a look at some of the best and worst teams of the T20 World Cup. We'll start with some good mentions. Nepal, first of all, and I'll give them a 5 out of 10. Reason being, it was their first appearance in the World Cup, and this is a team that, even though they didn't win a single match, they went down to the wire with South Africa. They won that match by just one run, and for an associate nation to do that against a finalist team was unbelievable. For that reason, I'll give South Africa a 5 on 10 and I'll mention them in good faith. Scotland, another team worth mentioning, and I'll give them a 6 out of 10. They defeated Namibia and Oman convincingly, and but the biggest highlight though was that they scored 90 against England in just 10 overs, but that match was washed out. If that match was to go through, who knows if Scotland would have won the game. And even though that match resulted in a washout, both Scotland and England were awarded 1 point each, and with that, Scotland had a chance of going through, but England put up an unbelievable performance against Oman, where they chased their 50 runs in about 3 overs. So if it wasn't for that massive performance by England against Oman, that run rate would have been very competitive, and it could have well been Scotland going through to the Super 8s. USA 7 on 10, and this is a really intriguing side. No one saw these performances coming in. They come in, they defeat Canada in their opening game, happening in the United States. Aaron Jones hits 10 sixes. What a game that was. But the highlight really for the United States team was defeating Pakistan in that crunch super over game, and that's what got them to the Super 8s as well. So what a performance from the United States team, and it's done a fair amount of good for the promotion of cricket in the United States. So I think they definitely deserve a good mention. Afghanistan 8 on 10, and they have definitely been the most exciting team in this World Cup, defeating New Zealand by 84 runs. They make them look like a school side. Australia was defeated by 21 runs, and there was so much behind that victory, wasn't there? Because as you know, there's a lot of tension between Australia and Afghanistan as well, on a political level, and on a sporting level, and the two are associated. So that victory really just meant so much for the Afghan team, for the nation, and it was also sending a message to Australia. So what a game that was. And then they also defeated Bangladesh towards the end to finally make it to the knockout stage. You had some Gulbuddin antics there as well, which made for good entertainment. But for Afghanistan to make it all the way to the knockout stage, that's a brilliant performance. And we know that this is going to be a team to look out for in all upcoming World Cup, especially the shorter formats, 50 over as well, 20 over, 50 over. This team is now quite a competitive side. And for T20, without a doubt. Next mention is South Africa, a 9 on 10. And this is a very important team to actually highlight. I mean, they went through to the final undefeated. People weren't even counting them in their top four, let alone being a potential World Cup champion. So for South Africa to pull that off, and given that they've never won a semi-final, um, uh, they're known as chokers. They still are chokers, but at least they've been elevated from semi-finalist chokers to finalist chokers. Um, Jokes apart, unbelievable performance, and just think about it. The team that defeated Australia, that defeated New Zealand, that defeated Bangladesh to come through to the semis, Afghanistan, that team was defeated in a completely one-sided game by this South African side. So that's how good South Africa were. And even in the final game with India, it was down to the wire, and until the point where it was 30 needed of 30 balls, with that show by Miller, um, it just seemed like it was South Africa's game. So for them to be so close to winning the World Cup, that's an unbelievable performance. And on that day, it could have also been South Africa who won, that match, but India was, of course, the better team, and that is who we are coming to. India, 10 out of 10, stunning performance. Undefeated throughout the World Cup, just like South Africa, and it's really been the perfect run for Team India because they got all the key teams throughout the tournament, and this is really what makes for a perfect Indian victory. They got to defeat Pakistan. They got to defeat Australia, who seems to have a psychological impact on all of the teams. They defeated England in the semi-finals, and then to finally defeat South Africa in the final in that fashion. Um, what a tournament for India! It's been the perfect run, really. And they also got to play some exciting cricket. They got to play in New York. They got to play in Guyana, in Kensington Oval finally. So a lot of cricket for them and a lot of fan following, a lot of fun. Um, there's only been good that's come out of that. Uh, okay, now moving on to some of the poorer performances. We'll start off with Sri Lanka. Unfortunate for them that the Nepal match was rained out, so they lost points there. But they also lost to Bangladesh and to South Africa. Um, it's unfortunate. We know that the Sri Lankan side has been in decline for a few years now, but still, for a team that has won the World Cup in the past, for a team that has produced some of the greats of the game, it's been quite an underwhelming performance, really. And we'd like to see more. We'd like to see good cricket come out of Sri Lanka, and I think there needs to be some sort of a revival there. Same story for another team that we know very well, New Zealand. It's always been a competitive side historically, but in this tournament, they lost to West Indies and they lost a very one-sided game to Afghanistan. Like we mentioned before, it looked like a school game the way Afghanistan defeated New Zealand, 84 runs. That's no joke. And so New Zealand has a lot of thinking to do. I think they are um, pressured by resources. They don't have the same amount of resources that an Australia does or India does. So I think that's certainly something that's affecting the quality of the New Zealand team, as well as the fact that they don't get to play as many overseas games. So I think New Zealand needs to look at ways to bring more exposure to their players. Um, but given the quality of the side historically, they need to do something about it. Next mention is Pakistan, and of course this has been Pakistan is always the dark horse in any tournament, and they're such an unpredictable team, right? But once again, the loss to the United States in that manner, that is a game they should have won, and that happened in the super over. Same story with the India game, right? Just at the very very last moment of the game. Those are games that they should have won. The game against the US especially, that's like no one would have seen that coming. Um, and I think it just comes down to the very basics with Pakistan. They seem to falter at some of the very basic things of the game. Things like game awareness or handling pressure. And it's one thing to not be able to handle pressure in a knockout game like South Africa, but it's another thing to consume so much pressure in a group stage game against a team like the United States. So Pakistan really have to go back to the basics and just they need some mental they need to deal with the mental gymnastics that's happening. So a very odd but hilarious problem for the Pakistan squad, but we know that that's a team that has also won trophies, so it's really a matter of recalibrating for them. Next, Australia, and Australia isn't generally a team you'd mention in the category of underwhelming performances. But by their standards, it was an underwhelming performance. They did not even make it to the knockout stage. But who's responsible for that? It's Australia themselves, along with a very, very good performance by Afghanistan, which knocked them out. So, not a good run for Australia. And especially also given the context that at one stage it seemed that England might not even make it to the Super 8s given Scotland's performance and the fact that 1 point was split between Scotland and England. Australia was well through into the Super 8s. But for then, after that, for Australia to not make it to the knockouts, but for England to make it to the knockouts, that just adds to the irony of the whole situation. And so Australia will be scratching their heads, but I'm sure that's a team that can come back. And it was still a relatively okay performance by Australia, but underwhelming by their own standards. England also performed well to make it to the semis, but to lose one-sided to India, they need to relook at their cricket as well. A decent performance by the West Indies. They certainly performed better than they have in recent World Cups, but they did have the advantage of home cricket. So there was that, and they did win 4 out of 4 in their early stages as well. So kudos to them for that. Um, I think it's fair to say, though, that regardless of all of the issues associated with this World Cup and whatnot, West Indies cricket was rejuvenated in the West Indies from what I've gathered. So the tournament has been good for the sport over there, and it's also definitely triggered some promotion of cricket in the United States. So overall, I think this was a rather exciting World Cup. Good to see the variation between the United States and West Indies. Of course, there could have been more thinking and more preparation to it, but I think overall this tournament has been good for the game of cricket.